Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello. This might not be the most freaky stories of all time, but it is a great reminder that you should never relax in a taxi car. In a place I live in, the taxi service is pretty well developed. We have a global app where you have an ID as a passenger, and the driver has one too. We have a rating system, so you know what to await, and you get punished for doing bad things. You feel pretty safe with that system. It's not like in old times absolutely random taxis. I've never had a serious trouble with drivers before that day. Yesterday, I needed to drive from one small town to another through the big city. Everything was pretty odd from the start. The taxi was showing very oddly on the app map, but it happens. Internet and geolocation can do the tricks. Either way, finally, the driver arrived and we started to move. The driver didn't press that he started the drive in the app. Neither I saw that he was in a waiting status. Sometimes they wait so they get some extra cash for waiting. I kinda tolerate that. But it was odd, and we were going to a bit of an unusual path, not the one that I am used to. I had a weird thought, which was, what will happen if he goes to the wrong direction right now? Not to the center, but to the suburban area. And damn, he did. He remained silent from the start of the trip, and in no way did he do it on accident. He hasn't started the drive yet in the app, and he is going literally on the opposite way, which is no chance is leading to my final destination. At that moment, I felt very scared. It does feel horrible when something like this happens and you are alone. For context, I'm 27 and female. After I ask him, "Hey, excuse me, what path did you choose? I don't need to go there." He immediately changed direction to the right way, pressed "The drive has been started" in the app, and then he was looking totally mad and upset. The trip was about an hour long. He kept driving not as a navigator suggested, but still on the right way. He especially started on messing the path when we were close to the end of the trip, and I called a friend at that moment, saying that I am close to arriving, just in case, so he knows that people are waiting for me. He remained silent and I came out of the car literally shaking. I understand that it is likely that he was up to the worst scenario that we are thinking of, but his actions were no way correct. What if I didn't have an online app working? What if I haven't checked the road? What if I didn't know the road? The most chill variant is that he would drive the longest way possible, which is like an hour longer, just to get more cash. But that's just too ridiculous. I did write a feedback and I reported the situation. So, to the creepy taxi driver, let's not meet again. Four years back, I had to move from a major East Coast city in the US to London for work. I had spent over 7 years in this city, and I was emotionally jolted by this move, as I was in a 3-year relationship and lived happily with my then girlfriend. On my last day there, I went with my girlfriend to my favorite sunset spot in the city. It felt like a fitting end to my chapter there, as my girlfriend and I had spent countless evenings walking there, and the spot was truly my happy place. As the sun dipped under the horizon, my girlfriend and I decided to get an Uber back home to spend our last night in our apartment that we had so painstakingly put together. As I ordered the Uber, I realized that I had accidentally ordered it a few blocks away and the cab was just a few minutes away. I grabbed my girlfriend's hand and then I started running towards our cab. While running, I noticed that another woman, short in her early 30s and very well put together, was also running behind us. While running, I joked to my girlfriend that she might have also ordered the cab to the wrong spot. However, we passed a couple of intersections and we are still unable to lose her. At the next intersection, the moment that it goes green, I tightly gripped my girlfriend's hand to prevent her from sprinting. The woman takes 2 steps ahead and realizes that we aren't moving. As she turns back to us, I ask her, "What do you want?" She responds almost immediately that she needs to get in the cab with us because her life is in danger. Her hand is in her purse and she is carrying a bag from T-Mobile in her other hand. Knowing that my girlfriend was going to be alone in that house for a few days after I left, I refused her request. I told her that I am happy to walk her to a safe space or even a police station if needed, but no way in hell was she finding out where my girlfriend lived. She kept on pleading, noting that her life is in danger and everyone is trying to get her. All this while she was looking around for someone in an extremely jerky way. I stood there on the side of the road for a good 10 minutes, refusing her request to come in the Uber with me. To make it crystal clear to her, I even canceled the Uber that I had ordered in front of her. Her hand was in her purse, and the fact that my girlfriend was going to be alone meant that I was in no mood to try my luck. After 10 minutes or so, she agreed to me getting her an Uber on my phone. I asked for her number to check in on her when she arrived, and she removed a new iPhone box with a post-it note from her T-Mobile bag and read the number from the post-it. This was the only time that her hand came out of her purse, and she slid it right back in after she read the number out to me. Ultimately, she put her location on a random suburban street by the woods, and I walked her to her Uber. And after getting a notification that she had reached her destination, I dropped her a message to ask her if she was okay, and I did not hear anything in return. What could explain this strange interaction? Is this some sort of a scam? What was she trying to achieve? Was I being too hard on her? I was just filled with emotions, and I did not want to put my girlfriend in danger. This happened just a few hours ago. I, a 33-year-old female, was leaving my apartment with my boyfriend and our small dog. I had ordered an Uber Pet. We were heading to my parents' house. It was already past 8 p.m., so it was dark outside. My city is relatively large, but Sunday nights tend to be quiet. Even though I live on a busy street, when my boyfriend and I stepped out of the building, there was no one else around. We had ordered the Uber from inside, and the driver was about 5 minutes away. And when he got close, we walked outside. The car turned the corner onto our street, but strangely, it didn't come all the way to us. It stopped about 5 meters away. I found that odd. Since we were the only people there, it was obvious that we were the passengers. For a moment, I wondered if the driver was bothered by my boyfriend holding the dog, but I had specifically ordered an Uber Pet, so he knew that there would be a dog. I started walking toward the car, and my boyfriend walked alongside me. As we got closer, we saw that there was a man sitting right behind the driver. The driver looked at us, canceled the drive, and then drove off. Now, if a driver already has a ride in progress, the app usually shows that, But this wasn't the case. There was no other ride ongoing. There was no reason for someone else to be in the car. I fear that he may have accepted the ride after seeing that the passenger was a woman, then stopped and waited to see if I was alone or if the man walking with me was just a random person. I've reported the situation to Uber, but I haven't received a response yet. Okay, so I don't usually post stuff like this, but this happened to me last week and I can't shake it off. I've told a couple of friends and they just said, "You're lucky nothing worse happened." But the more that I think about it, the more I feel like something was off, like really off. It was around midnight, raining so hard that visibility was basically zero. I'd stayed late at work, missed the last bus, and my phone was at 2%. So I just grabbed the first cab that I could find parked near the convenience store. The driver looked normal enough. Older guy, baseball cap, dark jacket. He gave me this grin when I got in and then said, "Where we headed tonight?" I told him my address, and he repeated it slowly, like he was trying to memorize it. And then he mumbled, "That's not too far from here. I can get you there pretty fast." I thought that was a weird thing to say, but people mumble things all the time. I buckled up, and soon as I was, he hit the gas. I felt the car lurch forward as the engine revved, speeding down the road, and within a few seconds, I realized that he was driving like a madman, like running red lights fast. I asked him to slow down and he just laughed, literally laughed and said, "Oh, relax. You'll get home quicker this way." And then he slammed on the gas again. I tried to play it cool at first. Maybe he was just a reckless driver. Maybe he was trying to show off. I don't know. But then he blew through another intersection, nearly clipped the parked car, and I swear my stomach jumped into my throat. "Can you please pull over? I'll just get another ride." I pleaded, but he just ignored me. I said it again, louder this time. Still nothing. And then I heard the click of the door locks. That sound hit me like ice water. I looked down at the door handle and instinctively tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. There was one of those thick plastic partitions between us, scratched up and grimy, and I could see his eyes in the reflection, focused, blank, and smiling. At that point, I was torn between panic and logic. We were still heading in the right direction. My street was only a few minutes away, and jumping out at that speed would have killed me, or worse. So there was no point in trying the door anymore. So I just sat there, counting the streetlights, watching the meter, trying to breathe. I kept telling myself that he's not kidnapping me, that he's just a creep, just to wait it out, hoping and praying that he didn't get into an accident. And finally, we turned onto my street. The car slowed down and I nearly cried from the relief. When we stopped, I immediately went for the handle, but it was still locked. He turned around and slowly, with that same grin, said, "See? Told you I would get you home fast." "Yeah," I said, forcing a laugh. "Thanks." I kept trying the door, but he kept it locked. "So, how about a tip, huh? I got you here quicker than any other cab in the city. I think it's deserved." I was confused and a bit intimidated. I asked him to open the door and let me out, but then he said something that still makes my skin crawl. "You got a nice place here." He tilted his head, still smiling, and said, "Now, how about a tip for the fastest ride in town?" His threat was clear as day. I tried to say that I would tip him through the app, but he just stared at me in the mirror. Didn't blink, didn't move. So I pulled out a 20. He didn't take it. He just kept looking. So I pulled out another, then another. And finally, when I handed over $60, he smiled. "Have a good night," he said, and then unlocked the doors. I practically fell out of the cab, and he drove off slow this time, like he was watching me, before slowly turning the corner. This is my first post to r/Let's Not Meet, and for story context, I'm a 29 MTF who presents as masculine for work-related things like rideshare. Basically, this means that I don't generally get tilted by people calling me he or him because, well, I don't pass. Anyway, so I use both apps, Uber and Lyft, and your girl usually doesn't have any problems. The riders are generally pretty nice or quiet, and honestly, I enjoy giving rides. It's not a lot of money, but enough in between paychecks at my big girl job to be enjoyable to do when I can. However, as I was cruising off from a ride, I get a new request for like $20 to $30. Not uncommon, but sometimes that means it's far as shit. This one was only 45 minutes, so not too bad. Plus, money. So I'm driving to the pickup bin, and it's at a decently fancy Japanese grill and a kinda run-down dispensary. I park out of the way of traffic and I hit arrive. 2 minutes, nobody. 3 minutes, someone walks up and she gets to my door. Here's where the scary shit starts. She doesn't immediately open the door. She reaches for the handle, sure, but she then proceeds to lean completely forward against my rear passenger door and laugh. She's laughing into the paint. Then, she bends all the way backwards to the point that her legs are almost 45 degrees with her torso. She opens the door, and apparently, my last rider left something in the back seat, and she stops laughing and starts snickering. I hit her with a, "Hi, are you?" the rider's name, in my forced masculine voice. In a creepily cutesy voice, she says, "Yeah, that be me. Someone done dropped thing in your backseat, Mr. Uberman." I notice, and I ask to keep it in the front seat with me so I can return it later. "Oh, damn. I guess she must have left it on accident." She stares not at me, but at the rearview mirror and then says, "Ain't you gonna call her?" I'll tell her that I'll do it when a request comes in to return it like I usually do. Now, quick aside to explain the characterization of this woman that I've made so far. I'm not going out of my way to be any kind of prejudiced. She legitimately spoke this way, and beyond just the country vernacular, she spoke as if she couldn't read well. As someone who's worked with people with traumatic mental disorders, or people who are severely mentally disturbed, or are neurodivergent, as a volunteer, I try my best not to be annoyed or be a bitch in these situations. Anyway, we then head off towards her destination pin 45 minutes away. First red flag, because the other so far could just be a rider being weird or drunk. She asked me to stop at a UPS store on our way to her destination. No biggie, right? Here's the issue. She didn't specify where, just the UPS. And as I opened up Google Maps to find the nearest one, she says, "Oh, you don't have to. But I have to get my friend out of jail. If I don't get this package, he gonna be there overnight, Oh, I said, not getting what the package had to do with jail, but I'm just playing along. Well, it's just he's gonna be there all night. If we don't get him out, he's gonna kill somebody. He in jail for killing. What the fuck? When I freak out visibly but not audibly, she smiles and then says, "Oh, we don't have to go there. Let's keep going back on the road. I know you Uber guys gotta make your money. Uber drivers don't get a lot of money, do they?" Weird pivot, but we keep going, and I nervously laugh and say, "Yeah, but I don't mind if you need me to stop." Wrong move. She continues to stare at me from the rear view every time that I glance back. We're on the highway before she says anything. "I like this car. What car this be?" I then tell her what the car is, and she says, "Ooh, it's nice. You like it? You like this car?" I nod and say, "Oh, yep, it's a nice car." And then she turns to the empty seat next to her, and then starts arguing with the air. No, it's his car. No, I don't think he wants to do that. Stop it." I say, "Is everything okay?" "Oh, my friend just said this car is nice." "Oh," I say, and I'm a bit freaked out, but it's whatever. People are weird, and it's not unusual for a grown woman to have an imaginary friend. "Mr. Uberman, do you think it's okay to steal if you have to?" I just shrug and go, "I mean, what do you mean?" "Like if I was in a local grocery store and I wanted bread, I should be able to take it, right? Especially if I work there." I shrug again, and then she adds, "I ain't no thief, it's 'cause I needs it." She turns around and yells at my trunk, "I got money, right, Mr. Uberman? I got a job, so I got money." She's getting visually more agitated. Then she turns to the trunk and then says, "What? No, you tell her to simmer down now. He's a nice man." And goes on this long rant about how she's not a vagabond and she's got a job so she ain't poor, but that poor people like to pretend they're not poor, switching from the seat next to her to the trunk. Eventually she smirks, and it's kind of off-putting because she's missing teeth. Now, do I necessarily care if someone is talking to themselves in a Lyft ride? No, I don't judge people. Life is hard. But when her imaginary friends start to sound like they want me to die, yes, I do mind. And I don't like being alive. But I'm not going to let someone else decide that. Then, I'm driving and keeping to myself, and she smirks in the rearview mirror and says in a scarily soft voice, "Aren't you sleepy? Are you hungry, honey? They say you're real sleepy. Do you like boba?" I'm now gripping the steering wheel and avoiding eye contact. "Oh, no, I'm okay. Thank you for the offer, though." "I'll pay if we stop," she says in her sing-song voice from earlier. "Let's stop. Maybe you could even pull over and nap for a bit." She's baring her teeth at this point, and I'm internally screaming that I want this ride over ASAP. But $20 is $20, so we keep driving. "Well, you killed her, so it is what it is," she says randomly to the trunk. So, new intel. She's talking to dead people. Holy spaceballs. So I'm now even more apt not to stop. We get to a stop sign, and then she stares at the headrest and then leans forward. Oh, I forgot to mention, all of this is happening while she's sitting directly behind me. She leans forward and then sticks out one bony figure and pokes on my shoulder. How does your body feel, Mr. Uberman? Huh? You sure you don't want something to eat? I could feed you if you just pull over somewhere. So it's like the 10th time she tries to get me to stop, and then she says, He's sleepy, ain't he? He gonna kill someone if he don't get some sleep. Someone gonna die. He got two choices. He choose. I ask, who is going to kill someone? She looks aware and then gets an angry face. Nothing. No one. So eventually, after being death stared at, and her imaginary ghost friends talking about robbing and or killing me, we get to her destination, and then she gets out. Aww, thanks for being so patient. Make sure you don't forget to eat, she says with deliberate pauses. And then she comes around to my window and smiles against the glass. I drive home, and I didn't drive for a lift for a week. So, to the lady who kept getting me to pull over to sleep with her in the car, let's not meet. I work the night shift at a truck stop off the interstate. Most nights are the same. Same drivers, same smell of burnt coffee and diesel. Same lonely kind of quiet between midnight and 3 a.m. But last month, we had one of those nights that still gives me chills whenever I think about it. It started like any other shift. Around 1 a.m., this big red Kenworth pulled up to the far end of the lot. Nothing unusual there. Truckers snap in their trucks all the time. But what caught my eye was how the driver just sat there. The headlights were off and the engine idling. He didn't get out and he didn't come in for food or coffee. He just sat there. An hour passed, then 2, and still no movement. I could see the faint glow of a cigarette from the cab every now and then, but that was it. At around 3 a.m., my coworker, Jay, said that he went out back to take the trash, and he swore that he saw the driver standing behind the truck, just staring into the woods behind the lot. When Jay waved and said, "Evening," the guy didn't respond. He just turned and then climbed back into the cab of the truck. We figured that he was tweaking or just dead tired. Happens more than often than you think. But then the customers started mentioning weird things. One woman said she thought she heard crying coming from the truck. Another said that it sounded like someone knocking from inside of it. I went to look again at around 4:30, and the guy was sitting in the diner now. He was hunched over a cup of coffee that had to be cold by then. He kept looking toward the door every time someone came in, like he was waiting for someone. His clothes were filthy, not been on the road too long kind of filthy, but like something was soaked through and then dried, and his hand shook when he drank. I asked him if he was okay. He just muttered, "Oh, just a long haul," and didn't look up. I noticed his fingernails were dark. I thought it was grease, but now I'm not so sure. He looked extremely tired, too tired to be behind the wheel. His eyes had bags so large that his eyes themselves seemed to have become sunken. When he got up, he stumbled a little bit, knocking over his cup by accident. At sunrise, he went back to his truck, and by then, the lot had filled up with more drivers. Normally, that's when people fuel or grab breakfast, but he just sat there again, his head dipping for a few seconds before perking up, like he was about to fall asleep, but managing to snap back awake for a second, only for him to droop once more. I finally told my boss, who decided to call the sheriff to do a welfare check on him. When the deputy showed up, they talked to him for a bit, and then one of them went around the back to the trailer. Next thing I know, they're both yelling for backup. We weren't told the details right away, but of course the word spread fast. One of the deputies later came in, pale as a ghost, and told my boss to keep everyone away from the windows. And the truck was impounded that morning. I didn't see what was inside, but from what the officers said later, they found a lot of disturbing stuff. Not drugs, not weapons. Worse, things that used to be people. They said the driver had been on the road for weeks, crossing state lines, picking up hitchhikers, and also runaways, and he kept them as trophies. They didn't tell us much else, just that he had been wanted for a while and have been on his tail for the past few days, which explained why he wasn't getting much sleep, and we were lucky we called when we did. Now, every time a rig pulls in and just sits there too long, I get this tight feeling in my chest. I still work nights, but I don't take the trash out alone anymore. I keep thinking about how he sat in that booth, shaking hands, staring at the door like he knew that it was over. And I keep wondering, how many times before had he stopped here and we never even noticed? I have been a long-haul truck driver for about 12 years now, and I have seen my fair share of weird things on the road. Accidents, strange lights, shady people at truck stops, even the occasional ghost story shared over a CB radio. But there's one night that still makes me uneasy. This happened about 4 years ago, somewhere along Highway 93 between Nevada and Arizona. That stretch of road is long, empty, and dark, the kind of place where the stars look fake because there is no light pollution, and you can go an hour without seeing another set of headlights. It was around 2 a.m., and I have been driving for maybe 10 hours straight. I was tired, but not falling asleep tired, just that slow, quiet fatigue that makes everything feel slightly unreal. I remember noticing something odd in my side mirror. It was a pair of headlights way behind me. That wasn't unusual, really. Lots of trucks take this route, so I called in on my radio to say hi. I said, "This is Big Duck. What's your 20? Only to be met with static. Again, nothing too unusual. Some people use a different frequency or just don't answer in general. But the headlight stayed a steady distance from me. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Still there. It was the same distance. I thought maybe it was another truck pacing me, so I slowed down a little, and the light slowed down too. I sped up, and so did they. It went on like that for almost half an hour, and eventually I flicked my CB on again and asked if anyone was out there. No response, just static. Finally, I decided to pull off at one of those small isolated rest areas, just a single bathroom building and a few old vending machines. I figured that if someone was following me, they would have to stop too. But when I turned into the rest stop and then looked in the mirror, the lights were gone. No car, no truck, just an empty highway. At that point, I told myself that I was overtired and seeing things. I parked, killed the engine, and went to stretch my legs. The night air was cold, and the desert was dead silent except for the buzzing of a flickering light above the restroom door. I was about to head inside when I heard gravel crunching behind me. It was footsteps, slow, deliberate ones, so I turned around expecting to see another driver. But there was no one there. It was just my truck, dimly lit by the overhead lamp. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds with my heart pounding, waiting for something to move, but there was nothing. And then I heard the CB radio crackle inside the cab. Just static at first, and then faintly, a voice. It said, "This is Big Duck. What's your 20?" It was staticky, but very clearly my voice. I swear to God, every hair on my neck stood up. I climbed into the cab, locked the doors, and I floored it out of there. My hands were shaking so bad that I could barely shift. I didn't stop until I reached a larger truck stop an hour away. I don't know what was happening, if the signal bounced on something and just came back an hour later, or if someone was just really good at impersonating me on the CB. But whatever it was, I didn't care. I knew that it was time to go. When I checked later, it wasn't even on the same channel that I used, and somehow it had switched by itself. To this day, I don't know what that was. I've heard stories about people disappearing out there, or strange lights that mess with electronics, and odd occurrences during the long drives at night. But I have never heard of anything like this. Nor has it ever happened again. Still, every time that I drive through that stretch of desert, I catch myself watching the mirrors, just in case those headlights show up again. And I'm not as friendly or talkative anymore.
This isn't my story. It's my dad's. So I'll have to try to remember how he said it. Back in the 80s, my dad had a trucking job where he would deliver goods interstate. Before us kids were born, him and Mum would travel the country together and come home to spend time with his family, who they lived with. They'd often go on unofficial road trips. He was driving from Sydney to Brisbane, one of the routes taken many times previously. It was nighttime and my mum was asleep, as she often did. The road was empty. I remember him saying it had to be 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning, so it was still dark out. The only light came from his headlights. Back then, like many places, there weren't as many buildings on the road, but there were some. He said it was difficult for him to stay awake, so he kept drinking really strong coffee. There was nothing to alter his perception, so to speak. I hope you understand what exactly I'm trying to say. He said he was driving along with nothing happening, and suddenly, there was a person standing in the middle of the road, and he managed to stop in time. He told me he braked hard, and remembered the loud screech that followed. Fortunately, it was of the brakes instead of a person. His heart was racing, and Mum had fallen off the bed with a yell, having no warning to brace herself. I must have a weird sense of humor, because I thought that part was hilarious. especially since Mum gets grumpy every time he brings it up. He said he didn't feel like he hit anything, while he was comforting her, telling her there was someone on the road. So he wanted to get out to check. She was going to get out too, but he told her to stay inside. He got down and saw no one there. He said he called out into the dark, and obviously, no one answered. He thought maybe it must have been a big kangaroo on the road, maybe one of the big reds, but it was too far east for them. Instead, he got back inside the truck, turned off his hazard lights, and got back on the road. My dad said he had a feeling of being watched from the side of the road, but there was no one there. It wasn't the first time he had issues when it came to people on the road. Since he didn't want to scare Mom, he didn't tell her what he was feeling. The drive was long, and he was still an hour away from the next pit stop, where he'd be able to get out and stretch his legs. You know, the slogan, stop, revive, and survive. Although that might have come a bit later. The road looked familiar, but not quite. He'd been traveling down this road for years. There were usually signs, other cars and trucks, petrol stations, and fast food restaurants like Macca's at the side of the road. There was nothing. My dad said my mom had gone back to sleep, so it was just him. He wondered whether he was going down the wrong road. He said it felt like it went on forever. There were no other cars or trucks on the road either. This was before GPS or Google Maps, so it would be difficult to immediately tell where he was. While he was driving, he saw blank figures by the side of the road. He remembered going too fast to see any distinctive features. It gave him an unsettling feeling. I remember him saying that the air itself felt weird. The weather had changed. It was supposed to be cloudy, and suddenly there were clear stars. Out there on the country roads, you could easily see the bright stars in the night sky. When he'd tell this part of the story, he'd look like there was much more to it, but he'd never tell me what it was, like he was keeping a secret from me. I don't know if it was one of those glitch in the Matrix things, or if there was something weird about what he saw. He said nothing felt right. He tried waking Mum up by calling her name, but she didn't budge. He said it felt like forever. Then, he blinked, and suddenly everything was back to normal. There were signs by the side of the road, other cars and trucks, and different buildings. When Mum woke up, she mentioned having a weird dream, but the longer she was awake, the harder it became to remember it. The rest of the drive went okay, and he hasn't had a repeat of what happened. So, does anyone have any ideas? Thanks.
I have been driving trucks for a long time, long enough that most nights blur together. Miles of highway, truck stop coffee, same playlist, same empty rest areas. I like night runs though because the roads are quiet. The downside is that sometimes, when I start getting tired, I make small mistakes. This happened a few years ago, somewhere in the middle of Kansas. It was past midnight, that stretch of the night where even the radio gets quiet. I had been on the road for 12 hours straight, and I was trying to find a place to park for a few hours of sleep. The GPS showed a truck stop a few miles ahead. There were no reviews, just a small icon on the map. I figured that maybe it was one of those older stations that hadn't been updated online in a while. The exit ramp was darker than most, no streetlights, no other cars, and when I came off the highway, the air felt heavier somehow. Just that deep rural silence that eats up all the noise. The GPS said that I was half a mile from the stop, so I followed the narrow 2-lane road past a few trees and an old billboard with half the letters missing. I started to get the feeling that something was off when I saw how overgrown the shoulder was. Grass came right up to the pavement, weeds tall enough to brush against my steps, and when I finally saw the truck stop, my stomach sank a little. It was just an empty lot with cracked asphalt and a couple of rusted light poles that weren't even on. The old sign was still there, leaning slightly, but the name had faded until you could barely read it. The whole place looked like it had been closed for years. I was already committed to the turn though, and the lot looked wide enough to maneuver. So, I decided to swing around and head back toward the highway. The only light came from my own headlights sweeping across the broken pavement. The reflection caught bits of glass, the edge of a dumpster, a patch of old oil stains, and everything else was just dark. As I started my turn, my GPS froze. The map screen stopped moving, and the little blue triangle just sat there pointing into nothing. I felt my chest tighten a bit for some reason. I knew exactly where I was, but that still made me uneasy. Technology quitting on you in the middle of nowhere always does. I eased forward, checking my mirrors, lining up the turn so I could head back out the way that I came. Well, that's when I saw a faint glow on the road behind me. Headlights. Another vehicle had taken the same exit. At first, I felt a little relieved. It was always nice knowing someone else is around. But then that relief faded when I realized the truck wasn't passing by. It was slowing down, turning into the same lot. I watched it in my mirror as it rolled forward, lights dimming, engine idling deep and low. It was another semi, older model, maybe white or gray, hard to tell under the weak light really. It pulled in behind me and stopped right at the mouth of the exit, perfectly positioned so that if I tried to leave, I'd have to pass within a few feet of its bumper. The driver didn't move, and no one got out. The engine stayed on, humming steady. The headlights stayed off, and only the faint glow of the running lights tracing its outline. For a minute, I sat completely still, foot on the brake, watching the mirror, and my own truck rattled softly. I could hear the wind moving through the weeds outside, and I just kept waiting for something. Maybe for the other driver to step out and wave, or maybe pull up beside me, but none of those happened. Just that the other truck was sitting there, blocking the only way out, engine running in the dark. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe he'd done the same thing that I did, pulled in thinking that this was an active stop, and now he was trying to turn around. Maybe he was just resting before backing out. But the longer it sat there, the harder it was to believe that. I kept my headlights pointed toward the back of the lot so that I could see if anyone moved. My heart was beating hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. I checked my mirrors every few seconds. Still nothing. Still that quiet low idle. 5 minutes passed, maybe more. It's hard to judge time when all you can hear is your own breath and the rumble of two engines. And then I finally put the truck in reverse, crept back a few feet, and I turned my cab toward the exit, and the other rig stayed still. When I started moving forward, slow and steady, it finally shifted. The brake lights flashed once, then it rolled backward just enough to open a narrow gap. I kept my speed low as I pulled past, trying not to look directly at the cab, but unable to stop myself. The cab windows were tinted, but I thought that I saw a shape in the driver's seat. No movement, just someone sitting there watching me go by. I didn't make eye contact. I didn't even breathe until I was back on the highway ramp. And when I finally merged back onto the interstate, I looked in my side mirror, and the other's truck lights came on again, but it didn't follow. It just sat there at the end of the exit ramp until the curve of the road took it out of sight. I drove for another 40 miles before I stopped at a real truck stop, one with bright lights and a few other rigs parked under the canopy. I sat there for a long time with my engine off, staring at the empty space in front of me, trying to figure out what had actually happened. Maybe it really was another driver who took a wrong turn and needed room to turn around. Maybe he never even noticed me. But what sticks with me is how deliberate it felt, how perfectly he parked, how long he waited before moving. There was no reason to stop right there, no reason to block the exit for that long. I never trusted random GPS stops since then. I stick to places that I know, real truck plazas with lights and cameras and people. Because that night, for a few minutes, I understood just how easy it is for someone to make you disappear in the middle of nowhere, and no one would even know where to start looking. I'm not sure if I'm just exaggerating things, but I can surely say that that was one of the most confusing and creepy thing that I have ever experienced. Everybody, please stay safe out there. I never thought that I'd be one of those people posting a story online, but I've had this story weighing on my chest for a year now, and with the anniversary of the encounter coming up, I felt like I needed to share it. This happened last Thanksgiving, and even though everyone tells me that I'm reading too much into it, I can't shake the feeling that I dodged something truly awful. My family wasn't doing a big gathering last year. Plans changed and a lot of family couldn't make it. My sister had moved out of town and my mom was sick. My dad was taking care of her at the hospital, and I was going to be spending Thanksgiving alone that year. I was 15 at that time, so with no one to spend the majority of the holiday with until my dad got home, I prepared a small dinner, just turkey breast, mashed potatoes, and a few of the usual comfort foods like chips and other junk foods. It was quiet outside, and the whole neighborhood practically empty since most people were with their families. Right around 6:30 p.m., when I finally got everything in the oven, I heard a knock coming from the front door. Not a normal knock either. 3 quick taps, a pause, and then one more. Almost sounded rehearsed, if you get what I mean. I froze because I wasn't expecting anyone. I thought maybe a delivery driver dropped something off. But when I checked the peephole, a man was standing there. He looked like he was in his mid-40s, wearing a dark jacket and a knit beanie. He wasn't carrying a package, wasn't holding anything at all. He was just standing there with his hands in his pockets and staring at my door like he was listening for me. I didn't open it. I just said through the door, "Can I help you?" He didn't answer at first. He stepped closer and then tilted his head slightly, like he was trying to line his eye up with the peephole. I jumped back because he got way too close. And then he spoke, soft, polite, almost sounded rehearsed. He said, "Sorry to bother you. Do you have any leftovers?" I thought I misheard him. Leftovers? It's not even dinner time yet. He didn't laugh or clarify. He said, I haven't eaten. It's Thanksgiving. I was hoping someone could spare a plate. Something about the way he said it felt off. People in need don't usually go door to door after dark in the suburbs, and they definitely don't try to peer into your house while asking. I told him, I'm sorry, I can't help. And then I backed away from the door. He didn't leave. He knocked again, but harder this time. You sure you don't have anything in there? He asked, voice suddenly lower and less polite. I didn't answer. I just dialed my dad and then I whispered that someone was at the door being weird. My dad told me to lock everything and then wait while he called one of our neighbors who lived a few houses down. And while I was on the phone, the man started trying the doorknob. Not violently though, slowly, like he thought maybe he could sneak it open if he was patient enough. I whispered, He's trying to get in, Dad. He's trying the door. And my dad told me to grab the biggest kitchen knife that I could and stay upstairs in my room. I crept halfway up the stairs before the knocking turned into a full-on pounding. As I passed the front door, I could hear his frantic voice. He kept repeating the same sentence over and over, saying, just a plate, almost chanting it. When the neighbor finally walked over, I could hear him shouting from outside, asking what was going on. The man immediately stopped pounding, but I didn't hear him walk away. No footsteps, no gate opening, nothing. It was silent. Too silent. My neighbor knocked and asked if I was okay. I peeked out the upstairs window, and that's when I saw the man. He was standing at the side of my house, halfway hidden behind the corner of the wall, like he just slid over there when the neighbor came. He wasn't looking at the neighbor. He was staring up at me, directly at my window. His hands were still in his pockets, but I could see his shoulders rise and fall like he was breathing too fast. My neighbor must have noticed something since I didn't come to the door and could assumingly hear the man breathing hard, because then he turned to the corner of the house and spotted the guy. When he shouted at him, the man finally bolted, just sprinted down the street, and then disappeared into the dark. The police were called. Reports were filed, the usual thing. But they never found the man. No one else in the neighborhood got a knock like that. They checked shelters, asked around, but nothing. Here's the part that bothers me the most. When my dad got home later that night, he found footprints in the soft dirt along the side of the house, leading from my backyard heading to my front door. The guy hadn't come from the street. He'd been behind my house first, watching and waiting. I still lock every door and window hours before sunset now. And this Thanksgiving, I'm going to my sister's place. I don't care if I have to take a 3-hour flight to get there. Because every time that I think about that night, I keep coming back to one thought that I just can't get rid of. He didn't want food. He wanted to see who would open the door. I was on the highway with my husband and our daughter, driving to my aunt's house for Thanksgiving. It was still early in the afternoon, but the sky looked heavy and gray, the kind that makes everything feel quieter than usual. The road stretched out in front of us with long empty patches, and the radio signal kept cutting out every few minutes. We were about an hour away from my aunt's place when the car started making a strange grinding sound. It was soft at first, almost easy to ignore, but then the whole car gave a sudden jerk that made my stomach tighten. My husband pulled over to the shoulder as the engine began to sputter like it was choking on air. When we finally rolled to a full stop, the car trembled once more and then died. He tried to turn it back on, but the only sound was a dry clicking that made it obvious that the car was not going anywhere. I remember feeling this slow wave of dread settle in my chest, not a dramatic panic, just that cold practical awareness that we were stuck on a long, mostly empty road on a holiday when half of the world wasn't even working. We called roadside assistance and we were told that someone could get to us, but that it would take 40 minutes. That didn't sound too bad, but the temperature was dropping fast and the wind coming off the open road was sharp. Cars passed by, but not that many, and each one shook our car slightly as it went. Our daughter kept rubbing her hands together, and I could feel my own fingers getting stiff from the cold. I tried to stay calm by focusing on the fact that help was on the way. After about 15 minutes, a pickup truck slowed down in front of us. It was old, the kind with faded paint that used to be red, but now looked almost brown. The windows were muddy too, and the brake lights flickered unevenly, like they had trouble staying on. The truck pulled onto the shoulder a few yards ahead of us and then rolled to a stop. At first, I felt relieved. It was hard not to feel grateful when someone actually stopped on the road like that. But then the driver got out. He moved slowly, like every step required thought. I noticed that he was tall, maybe in his late 40s or 50s, with a heavy coat that looked dirty in a way that wasn't just from work. His boots left dark prints on the gravel, and he kept one hand in his pocket as he walked. There was something in the way he looked at our car that made my stomach turn. It wasn't concern, it was more like he was assessing something. He came right up to the passenger side window, and my husband cracked it open only an inch. From where I sat, I could see the man's eyes moving over the inside of our car, pausing on my daughter in the back seat. He didn't smile. He didn't look surprised or friendly. His expression was flat, almost blank, like he was studying something that he didn't care about. He asked if we needed help. He didn't sound annoyed or cheerful, just strangely calm. My husband told him that we had roadside assistance coming, but the man didn't seem happy about that. He started asking questions, first normal ones about the car, but then he moved on to things that had nothing to do with the situation. He asked where we were heading, whether we had family nearby, how long we'd been driving, whether we lived close to here or far away. I remember the way he asked it too. It was slow, like he was trying to memorize every detail. He kept shifting his weight back and forth, and his boots scraped the gravel every time that he moved. At one point, he leaned down closer to the window, and I instinctively pulled my daughter closer to me, even though she was already strapped into her seat. He didn't seem cold at all, even though the wind was blowing hard. His breath didn't shake and his hands didn't tremble. He just kept studying us. And then he told us that it wasn't safe to stay in the car with the cold dropping like it was. He said that we should get into his truck to stay warm. He didn't offer a blanket, he didn't offer tools, he just kept insisting that we get out of the car. He gestured to the truck behind him like it was some kind of obvious solution. The inside of it was dark from where I sat, and I couldn't see anything past the passenger seat, and not even the shape of it. I felt my chest tighten, as something about the idea of leaving our locked car to get inside a stranger's dark truck made my skin crawl. My husband thanked him, but told him that we were fine waiting. But the man kept standing there. He didn't leave, he didn't shrug and walk away. He just stood still, staring through the crack in the window. like he was waiting for one of us to change our mind. Minutes passed, though it felt longer. My ears were ringing from how hard I was trying to listen to the road behind us, hoping to hear the tow truck. The stranger kept asking the same questions, like he thought that he would get different answers the second time. The whole time his eyes kept drifting back to my daughter. Each time he stared a little longer. He kept asking us to go into his car, trying to convince us that it was the better solution, and each time that we said no, he got more agitated. But then, finally, I saw headlights much farther down the road approaching slowly in the right lane. It looked like a tow truck, the bright top lights bouncing slightly on the uneven highway surface. And the man noticed it too. And as soon as he saw it, his expression changed. It wasn't relief or disappointment. It was something darker, almost frustrated. He stepped back from our car and looked at the tow truck again. And without saying anything, he turned toward his own truck. But instead of driving off, he walked around the front of it and then headed straight for the tree line a few yards off the shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't look back. He just disappeared into the woods like he knew exactly where he was going. My husband and I sat frozen, watching the place where he had vanished. The tow truck pulled up behind us, and the driver stepped out friendly and casual, like nothing strange had happened at all. He asked what was wrong with the car. He didn't see the man. He didn't see anyone walking away. It was like the stranger had dissolved into the trees. The tow truck driver fixed our car enough for us to follow him to a shop in the next town. And the whole time that we were driving, I kept looking in the side mirror, expecting that old pickup truck to appear behind us. But it never did. Long story short, we got to my aunt's house later than planned. I didn't tell the whole story until the next day because I didn't want to ruin Thanksgiving dinner. Even now, every year around the holiday, I think about that man stepping into the woods without a word. I think about how he kept telling us to go into his truck, and I think about how fast he changed once he realized that someone else was coming. I don't know what he wanted, but I know for a fact it wasn't to help. And when I picture his face through that cracked window, I feel grateful for every cold minute that we spent waiting in our own locked car. I went to the store the night before Thanksgiving because I had forgotten chicken broth and onions, two things that somehow feel impossible to skip. The store was crowded in that tired, desperate holiday way, with people pushing carts like they were on autopilot. I grabbed a basket and I went straight to the produce section. And that's where I first saw him. He stood between the potatoes and the green beans, not picking anything up, just watching people move around him. I noticed him because he didn't have a cart or a basket. He looked like he had just walked in off the street. He had this thin jacket, jeans a little too long, hands shoved deep into his pockets. I only glanced at him for a second before looking away, and nothing seemed too strange yet. But then, I walked to the baking aisle, and he was suddenly there again. Same posture, same stare. It wasn't the kind of stare where someone accidentally looks too long. It was focused, like his eyes were following me as I grabbed the sugar. I told myself that I was imagining things. Stores are busy on holidays, and people cross paths. I then went to the canned goods, and there he was, standing at the end of the aisle, not even pretending to shop. His head was tilted slightly, his eyes locked on me like he was waiting for something. My chest tightened, but I kept moving. I didn't want to panic over nothing. I took a different route to the dairy section to shake the feeling, and he was already there. This time, He was closer, maybe 10 feet away. He still had no cart and no items in his hands, and there was no expression on his face. The fluorescent lights above made his skin look gray and flat, almost sickly, and I could hear the hum of the freezers and the sound of a kid crying somewhere behind me. But he was just completely still. When I turned to leave, I heard footsteps fall into place behind me, not fast, not loud, but timed with mine. I didn't look back. I just headed straight for the self-checkout, scanning my items as fast as I could, and my hands were shaking so badly that I dropped the onions twice. I then rushed out into the parking lot, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't see him behind me anymore, and for a moment, I felt kind of stupid for being scared. I told myself that it was just nerves and stress or coincidence. You know, that holiday stress we get? I then loaded the bags into my back seat, got in, locked the doors, and I sat for a second to breathe. And then my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me reacted before I could think, and then I answered. I didn't hear background noise, just breathing. I felt my entire body go cold, and I didn't say anything, and then I heard a voice whisper. It described my jacket, the exact color of it. He described the little stain on my right sleeve that I hadn't even noticed. He described the braid in my hair and the scuff mark on my shoe. Every detail was something that I hadn't shared with anyone, and something he could only see if he had been standing right next to me. He then whispered that he enjoyed shopping together, and then he hung up. I did not go back to that store for 3 months, and even now, every time that I'm in a crowded aisle and someone walks behind me, I swear I can feel that same stare on the back of my neck. I don't know how he got my number. I don't know how this thing happened to me and why it did. But all I know is, to the man who stalked me while I was shopping for Thanksgiving things, I hope that I never see you again. I hadn't seen my Uncle Dan in almost 12 years before that Thanksgiving. For most of my life, he was just a name that people mentioned in passing, the relative who lived somewhere out west, always with vague explanations about why he never visited. My mom never said anything bad about him directly, but any time that his name came up, she would change the subject in a soft but firm way that made it clear that she didn't want to talk about him. So, when he suddenly showed up at my parents' house that Thanksgiving, it felt strange right from the start. He walked in with this huge smile like he'd been part of every holiday all along and that nothing had changed. He hugged everyone too tightly, like he was trying to make up for years in a single gesture. I remember thinking that he looked older than I expected, and not just regular aging, but that worn-out look people get after long stretches of stress. His hair was messy, and he had deep shadows under his eyes, the kind that don't go away with sleep. Still, he acted friendly and cheerful. He complimented everything in the house, laughed loudly at things that weren't really that funny, and touched people's backs and shoulders more than normal. Most of us didn't know him well enough to say anything, so we all just pretended that it was fine. It wasn't fine. The first thing that felt off was how he moved around the house. He didn't sit with everyone else or join in on anything for long. He wandered. He drifted from room to room with this slow searching pace, like he was looking for something specific, but didn't want to seem obvious about it. Every time that I turned around, he was somewhere different, standing in the hallway watching people, hovering by the kitchen doorway, walking past the guest rooms even though no one was in them. At one point, I went upstairs to help my mom make the beds for my cousins who were staying the night there. And while we were working, I heard soft footsteps on the carpeted hallway outside. When I stepped out, he was standing there, not doing anything, just staring at the slightly open door like he had been listening. And when he saw me, he gave this slow smile, too slow, like he had forgotten how to do it naturally, and then he walked off without saying anything. Later in that day, I noticed that he kept trying to ask everyone questions that felt too personal. He wanted to know where each of us lived, how far away it was, who we lived with, whether we lived alone, what floor our apartments were on. He asked about our routines, our work hours, what days we stayed home, and he asked what kind of locks we had, what kind of neighborhoods we lived in. He didn't write anything down, but I could tell that he was trying to remember it. He spent a lot of time around the kids too, my cousin's kids, all under 10. He didn't play with them, he didn't talk to them, he just watched them. There was one moment when my cousin's youngest fell asleep on the couch after dinner, and I saw Uncle Dan standing near the wall behind him. He was not close enough to be noticed, but close enough to stare. He wasn't looking at the TV or anyone else, just the sleeping child. His face didn't show anything. There was no smile, no warmth, no nothing. Just that same blank stare. When he realized that I was watching him, he shifted his eyes to me without moving his head, and it made my chest feel tight because it was such a cold, empty look, like he was annoyed that I had noticed. As the night went on, he became even stranger. His cheerful act faded, and his face settled into this unsettling calm. Every once in a while, I found him standing in the shadows of the doorways, watching people pass by without saying anything. He walked around the house like he knew it better than he should after 12 years away. He kept looking at windows, locks, the sliding door, the back porch steps. My husband later told me that when he went outside to bring in firewood, he found Dan standing in the dark yard, staring at the house with his hands in his pockets. He didn't seem to notice the cold or the fact that he was standing in the wet leaves. He was just looking at the house like he was studying it. The last thing that pushed everything over the edge happened after most of the guests had left. My parents always let a few people stay the night. I went upstairs to grab some extra blankets, and I saw Uncle Dan standing at the top of the stairs, motionless, with his head slightly tilted, as if he was listening for something. He didn't react when I walked around him. He just continued standing there, breathing slowly, his eyes following me but his body not moving at all. That night, my mom quietly pulled me aside in the kitchen. She didn't say much, just reminded me to lock our bedroom door. I could tell by her face that she was scared. She knew something was wrong with him. Maybe she had always known. Early the next morning, before most of us were awake, he was gone. No goodbye, no note, nothing. He just vanished. My dad said he checked the guest room and the bed didn't look slept in. He had taken his jacket, but he left behind a cup of water that had barely been touched. For weeks after that, a few of us swore we saw someone who looked like him sitting in the random parking lots near our houses or standing far down our streets at night. Too far to be sure. Maybe it was just our imagination. Maybe it was someone else. I honestly don't know. All I do know is that something was deeply wrong with him. Something that didn't show on the surface right away, but became clearer and clearer the longer that he was at the house. I still think about the way he studied everything, ask about our routines, our locks, the kids, everything. The way he moved around quietly, always just out of view. Nothing has happened yet, but I have a sinking feeling that something might happen, and it will be because of him. Sometimes, when I wake up at night for no reason, I get this chill down my spine, thinking about Uncle Dan. So, Uncle Dan, I don't know what you're up to and what your plan is or what is wrong with you, but I hope that we never meet again. I wasn't planning on sharing this, but the closer it gets to Thanksgiving this year, the more the memory keeps circling back. Maybe writing it out will help me move past it. Last Thanksgiving, my family did something different. Instead of a big dinner, we decided to volunteer at a community center earlier in the day, and then just have a small meal at home at night. By the time that we got back, we were exhausted, and honestly, a little drained from dealing with the crowds. At around 9 p.m., I stepped outside to throw some trash away, turkey packaging, vegetable scraps, that kind of stuff. It was cold enough that you could see your breath, and the whole neighborhood was quiet. Most of the houses were dark except for a few porch lights. As I was dragging the garbage bag to the end of the driveway, I noticed a car that I didn't recognize parked across the street. The engine was off, no lights, and at first I thought it was just a guest visiting one of my neighbors. But then I saw someone sitting in the driver's seat. They weren't doing anything. No phone glow, no radio, no movement, just staring straight ahead with their hands on the wheel. And even from across the street, I got this deep, instinctive feeling that they were watching me without turning their head. I know, that sounds weird, but that's how I felt and how I would describe it. I tried to play it off though. I just tied the bag, walked back inside, locked the door and told myself that it was nothing. After a couple of minutes later, I checked the peephole, and the car was still there. The person inside was now turned slightly toward my house. I told my mom, who shrugged it off and said that it was probably someone waiting to sober up after a drunken Thanksgiving dinner. I wanted to believe her, so I went back to ignoring it. At around 10 p.m., we were cleaning up the last of the dishes, and my mom had gone upstairs to shower. I had walked into the living room to check on the front windows again, and the car was gone. I felt relieved, like maybe I was just worried for nothing. But then, someone knocked. 3 slow, heavy knocks on our front door. I froze. It was too late for guests, and all of our neighbors were busy with their own families. I didn't move or say anything, hoping that they think no one was home. And then they knocked again, slower this time. I crept to the peephole and then looked out. No one was there. But the porch light was shining on fresh footprints in the frost on our steps. Not shoe prints. Sock prints is what it looked like someone had walked barefoot except for a thin layer of fabric. I backed away from the door and I reached for my phone, and before I could call anyone, another knock came. But this one was from the side door, the one that leads straight into our laundry room. That door has no peephole. I heard the handle jiggle, and then the tapping started. Not knocking, tapping. Like someone running their finger along the door panel in a slow, lazy click. I called my mom, whispering that someone was trying to get in, and by the time that she ran downstairs, the noises had stopped. When we checked the backyard from our kitchen window, that same car from earlier was idling behind our fence gate, engine on this time, and the exhaust steaming into the cold air. Someone was now standing next to it. They weren't moving toward the house, they weren't breaking in. They were just standing there, facing our window like they were waiting for us to look out and see them. We called the police, and the second that we turned on the back porch light, the person got into the car and drove away without headlights. The officers took our statements, but said that unless we had more evidence that the person tried to enter the home, there really wasn't much that they could do. They did patrol for a while, but they never found the vehicle. Here's the part that I didn't tell the officers because I forgot about it until later. Remember the sock prints on the front steps? They were tiny, like a child's, but the person standing by the car, definitely an adult. So I don't know who knocked on our door that night or who was watching the house. But every Thanksgiving, I check the windows more times than I'd like to admit, because sometimes I think the knocking wasn't really the point. I think it was a test or something. I think they wanted to see what we would do when someone tried to get in. What would it take for us to call the police? And most importantly, what doors we kept locked, and how long it would take us to get to them. Of course, all of this are just my assumptions. I have no proof, and honestly, I don't want to know more. But if you have any opinions about the situation, please, I would really appreciate it if you could let me know. And thank you for reading my story. Hey everyone, this is your creepy sister. Thank you so much for watching the video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to leave a like and a comment. It really helps the channel out. A big shout out to both my channel members and Patreon members. Thank you so much for taking your support to the next level. You guys are great. And again, to everyone, stay scared because your fear feeds me.